Welcome back, listeners. I'm Robin Black, and this is It's All About Healing podcast. Today, we have a special guest with us again. And for those listeners who are familiar with my show, you will remember Miss Cindy Benezra. I cannot wait to speak to her again. And we're just gonna kind of discuss what healing after dealing with significant trauma is like, and this healing journey is far from linear. So we're just going to kind of get into that conversation today. Cindy, how are you?
It's great to be here. I'm good. I am really good. How about you?
I'm doing okay. I'm doing okay. A little tired, but I'm doing well.
You're hanging in there.
Yes, absolutely. So, Cindy, what was the name of your book again?
Under the Orange Blossoms, and
Okay.
it's a memoir self-help book. It takes you through, I'm a sexual abuse survivor,
Mhm.
and, where I had physical and, emotional abuse with that, and it takes you through the period of time where I was abused sexually abused from 0 excuse me, from 5 to 10, and
Mhm.
so I don't go into great detail about that, but I do share, what it felt like, and then from 10 years on, my dad was my perpetrator from 10 years on until now. I'm 60. I have been kind of going through a healing process. So this has been my life's journey, and so that's what the book is about, like, what happened and how trauma took me through life and how I went through all the different stages, like, teenage years, young adulthood, then, dating, also having children, then going on, with my trauma about the raising children, and then kind of seeing my children raised differently and the triggers that went from there. Um, Being married, having teenage kids, and now I'm gonna be a grandma soon. So I've really had the journey of what it's like, the stages of trauma, and I feel very, well, let's just say weathered and wise, not weathered in a bad way, but just very, let's say, resolute, like, this is the process, this is the journey of going through life with trauma for myself.
Yes, and that's what I really want to touch base on is that very thing. So, with that significant amount of trauma that you had to endure, what has your life been through? You know what I mean? Each milestone, that each step that you have taken through life, and like you said, through dating and dealing with that heartbreak, what was that like for you? Because I mean, I would assume that it had to be different, significantly different because of the trauma, because of the triggers. So, how did you cope with that?
It was, it feels like if you had a movie and someone was writing my script of life, it felt, and looking back at it, it feels like, I'm trying to put this in words. It feels like I could look at myself now and look at the movie and watch it unfold in different episodes of time, and some were incredibly hard times where I kept on hitting my head against the wall, and I just could not get over it. I didn't know how to get over that wall, over that hump, and so I kept on doing the same behavior. I kept on thinking the same way, and it kinda trapped me at times.
Yeah.
That's what it felt like. I was just trapped, from my trauma, and then I would go over that hurdle, and then I would go on for years, and
Yeah.
then before you know it, something else would happen, and it might have been 40 triggers that year,
Yeah.
and those were just heavier years, and I used to get angry because I used to think that it would all stop.
Yeah.
But there was only so much that I could allow, and then I think once I got to the point where I recognized that healing is a journey, that
Mhm.
there's no magic wand, that there's not a pill necessarily for that journey, and it takes a lot of growth, a lot of growth, a lot of, willingness to go on. in everything, all in all, what I have noticed most now, because I feel like I've gone through so much healing. I mean, nothing's perfect right now, but I still have triggers. But what I realized that because I put so much energy into this path of healing, that in a lot of ways I've benefited as a human being.
Mhm.
And, not to say that everybody should go through trauma, but sometimes trauma is incredible growth, and it makes us expand. It pushes you to the limit, and we become we find like a higher we find our higher self, let's just say that.
Yeah,
And I think we find that empowerment in a sense, whatever was taken or removed, it becomes a new kind of empowerment, and it feels amazing to be on the other side of that.
I agree. I agree with that 1000%. Now, what would you suggest as in how a lot of people can identify their triggers?
Say that again?
What would you suggest in identify how certain, how people can actually identify their triggers, that they for them to understand what's
Mhm.
causing them to react and display the behavior that's being displayed?
Well, I remember when I was a kid, gosh, so I was in high school, I was a teenager.
Mhm.
So that was the time where, I realized that this dream that I had, I thought it was all a dream, I forgot. I just blacked out what had happened to me as a kid, and it all unfolded when I started to become sexually active, and I would have these horrific nightmares, these dreams, and it felt like, the dream was just in shattered pieces, and I had night sweats, and I'd wake up screaming, but then I'd write down just to make myself feel whole again, because I felt like I was losing my mind, I'd write down a little bit of the dream, and then eventually I started writing down descriptive details,
Yeah.
like what the room looked like, where my pain was in my body,
Yeah.
what I felt, and because I felt like I was losing my mind, I felt like I was a crazy person, and I didn't know how to go and talk to anybody because I was embarrassed. I really felt like I was losing it, like there was no hope for me, and plus I was a teenager, so I didn't really share. I mean, I would share about my eyeliner, but I'm certainly not gonna share about my about these horrible dreams about, um, sexual things, and I was thinking, like, "How could this happen when I'm still a virgin?"
Mhm.
So, okay, long story short, this was all unfolding, but I didn't know that I had dissociated from the
Yeah.
past.
Mhm.
So having sexual interest became a trigger, and so anything from there on around sex or the feeling of sex or a daydream or whatever it may be, because we're just human, that's what we kinda go, "Hey, they're kinda cute," but that was all a trigger. There would be forms of triggers in there, and I didn't know what they were, so I would have these flashbacks, and sometimes they were out of body experiences where I just thought, "I don't know what's going on." I also, as things were unfolding in my notebook with all this trauma where I was putting pieces together, then I realized this was truly my life, and that's when I hit this incredible depression, and I realized this was my life, and this was not a dream, this was not a book, this was not a movie, this was me in this movie, and I think the impact of that was I wanted to die, basically. I did not wanna be here on this earth. I just thought, "I cannot handle so much pain," and then I went through the journey of, like, okay, my mind stopped me and didn't allow me to recover all these memories because I couldn't progress in life, and so then I became grateful, and so it was like, "Okay, I'm grateful for my mind for protecting myself," but then at the same time, then I became angry at my perpetrator, and so
Yeah.
it's like this cycle, And when I started to accept that there's when you go 1 step forward, you're gonna probably go 2 steps backwards.
Right.
Process that.
Right.
And I would get so mad as I especially through my teens, my young adult years, while everybody was going to school, I was just trying to survive the trauma. I
Right.
couldn't think about anything else. I was just trying to go through the day, and I was angry. I mean, angry, raging angry, and I'm my poor notebook had, like, stab holes in it.
Yeah.
Was just so mad because I felt that everybody had it so much easier than me, and I was doing this in silence, and I was doing this just in my head, the voices in my head. But when I got older, outside of that, I realized that so many people go through different forms of trauma, and
Yes.
we all think we're going through it alone. We all think that we're the only cursed person out there. Um, we all think that we're overly sensitive and that we're just too deep and that
Yeah.
we can't recover, and then when you realize that, then you're like, "No, I'm just human,
Yeah.
and I feel this intensely." And feeling it intensely, then you recognize that that's part of the healing journey, and it's okay to feel those triggers, and then you start to think about, "Okay, what are those things that trigger me? What are those things that just where I get hooked?"
Mhm.
And that's what I used to call, like, "Oh, they're trying to hook me," but then I realized they're not trying to hook me, it was really my mind would get
Right.
hooked, where
Yeah.
you have to take the responsibility, like, "Oh, like, okay, this is me, and this is my work that I gotta do on this." I think with close friends and family, I started telling them, like, "Hey, I'm gonna get triggered, and you're gonna go, 'What is wrong with you?'" So I would just say, "If this happens, then don't whatever you do, don't leave me. Just whatever you do, don't leave me." And then they would like, friends and people would stay with me, and they wouldn't leave me because abandonment was the worst thing I could do when I was going through these triggers, no matter what I was flipping out about. Just don't leave me. And that instilled a lot of trust. And then I could talk to them about it, and I could say, "I'm sorry," but it really I think for friends and family, it really takes a ton of self-awareness and communication with somebody who loves you, but is also angry about the way you reacted.
Yeah. And I like that. I like that you said, just don't leave me. Cause I know when a lot of us, even myself, when we have dealt with so much trauma, the first thing not the first thing, but a lot of times when it's deep trauma, we think, I don't want to be here anymore. There's no point in me being on this earth. And when I feel that when a lot of people are suicidal, they try to they tend to push people away, but
Mhm,
it's really like, whatever you do, don't leave me. This is the time that I feel most people, or the people surrounding you, your loved ones around you, need to be there the most, even though you feel like you want to push them away, but you really need them. And I love that. I love that, just whatever you're being able to vocalize, don't leave me. And
mhm,
it takes a lot for some people to say, don't leave me, because a lot of people who are in that state of mind, they don't know how to admit that. They don't know how to say, don't leave me. I need you to stay with me. And that just like really touched me on on so many levels, and I really like hearing that.
I think it's really hard for the other person, but only somebody who could really have the patience, and I think we pick people who know how to stand. I guess I always feel like they're standing guard
Mhm.
or holding space for me. I
Mhm.
always felt that those people were special people, maybe in some way I knew that they would, and they would stand and be
Yeah.
loyal and hold space for me, and then I could go back and talk through it. But I have to say, at least through when I got married, and my husband's a talker. He's a talker, and I have to say he's not really, mm He's not really intuitive. He's not mushy and gushy with his feelings, but I am, and sometimes he would look at me and go, "Oh god, it's gotta be a lot for you to
Yeah.
think this." And then I w I would say, "Okay, well, just listen to me," and he would listen to me, and I think that was everything, is just to be heard because I was not heard as a kid. I was dismissed, I felt I remember there was a time in life where I didn't want people to know that I was around. I would practice and I would say it like a mantra. "I am the wallpaper. I am the wallpaper. Be the wallpaper. Be the wallpaper." 'Cause I didn't want anyone to see me because I had so much shame. I didn't want my teachers to call on me because I was just in the classroom surviving, it
Right.
was a safe place, like, school was just a place that I could be, for a certain amount of hours and not have anything happen to me, not get
Mhm.
hit or hurt, or it was a place to check out.
Yeah.
It was a place where I could laugh at somebody else, it was a lighter conversation, we're playing kickball. I mean, it was escapism,
Yeah.
and school was not a place for me to learn, it was just a place to hide out.
Right. I get that. And then as far as I know earlier you stated that you would kind of disassociate yourself from
Mhm.
certain things. Like how often did you do that or how long did you do that for? And what was that like?
Uh, okay, so I didn't know how much I was doing that, and my nickname was Spacey Cindy, so they would go,
Mhm.
"Oh, you're so spacey," and I or would have some name for me, but in reality, when I realized they were just moments of dissociation, and I worked really hard in staying in my body and
Mhm.
feeling everything, and I knew as soon as it was something boring, it just any topic that was boring, I
Yeah.
was out in my own world. I was like, "Huh? Like, what'd you guys
Yeah.
say?" I don't know, because I was someplace else for the last half an hour, and
Mhm.
it was comfortable, and then I realized that the discomfort of staying present was where I needed to be and listen to what's going on. But I have to tell you, soon as I heard, any kind of elevated voices, any word that triggered me where I kind of was like, "Oh, I have to be on alert, something's going on." I
Yeah.
was back in the room. So I wasn't too far, but I was
Mhm.
close enough.
Yeah, I get that. You said it was boring. Yeah, I get that too. I definitely do that. If I'm not interested, I will kind of go somewhere else mentally.
We had, when I was a kid, we had this, he had Down syndrome,
Mhm.
and, I recognized when he was doing his own thing. I loved talking to him, so we would actually hang out. He was older than me, and I he had a swimming pool, so I would like to go over there and swim in his pool.
Mhm.
Um, the the reality was I really, really liked him, and when I would watch him, he would just suddenly say, "Hey, I'm done now," and then just go off in his own world because he was just done talking to me.
Yeah.
I thought, "That's what I do in just a different way, in a lot more sophisticated way when
Right.
I'm just done, I'm tired."
Yeah.
And that's when I thought, "Okay, I have to stay in my body, I have to stay with my thoughts." And then trying to find ways to do that. I remember wearing, clothing that has a lot of texture to it, so I would rub my hands on my pants, or I'd take off my shoes if I was dissociating and I felt it was dangerous. I would take off my shoes or rub my toes in my shoes so that I could feel like, "Okay, I'm here and I'm on the ground," like, my feet are on the ground. Or, there's, like, a tingling feeling when you're like pins and needles when you're like, "Oh, no," and then adrenaline's pumping and you're like, "Don't stay in your body," just
Right.
stay in your body, and, I think later on when I went back to living with my dad, I would have to open up the window and just smell the fresh, cold air, and I would be like, "Okay." Bite on ice is a great way to, it was a great way for me to s it was the cold in my mouth and the crunching of the ice would keep me in my body. Um, Boy, what other things? A tech Just a lot of textured things. I think those were the things that kinda would remind me just like, "Don't go anywhere. Just
Right.
stay here and feel this." It's
Yeah.
work. And so when people are in school, I'm just trying to stay in my body, and so that's why I always say I was just trying to survive. I was just trying to cope with life.
And do you still cope with life that way at times? Do you still go back and forth, or what is it like now?
I don't have that now, but,
Yeah.
um, I know what that's like. I still am afraid of aggressive dogs. That's a trigger. I guess through therapy, I learned that my dad would, molest me. Often, I would run and get away, and
Mhm.
we lived out in well, we were in Arizona, and we lived in rural Arizona, so I'd run out of the house, and there was a lot of guard dogs because it's a very rural area, and the dogs were they didn't have fences, they would just run around in, like, packs, and being younger, I didn't have the advantage of being an adult, when it comes to aggressive dogs. So there's a little bit more, power, where you have a little bit more presence with a dog, and they would sense that fear, and
Mhm.
so somehow the dogs would sense that fear and then bite me, and then when I ended up taking on that a dog was my dad. So I didn't know that. It took me years going on that every time I'd hear a bell ring or a collar ring or the leaves blowing on the sidewalk, I thought it was a dog behind me. And
Right.
so what I realized, it wasn't my dad, it was just the wind, but it still gave me that feeling, and I would actually jump on cars and just start screaming.
Yeah.
I'd just start screaming like, "Get the dog away from me, get the
Yeah.
dog away."
Yeah.
And family or friends would go, "Okay, Cindy, come off. You know, we're gonna walk past this dog."
Mhm.
I tried all kinds of therapy for that one. Oh boy, that was a hard one for me to get over. But there's um certain dogs now, pretty aggressive dogs, where I'll look, and if they're off their leash, I go right back into it. That's still a trigger for me.
Oh, wow. Okay. Wow.
Mhm,
And you
mhm.
said, so are you still seeing someone to deal with that, you said, or no?
I've gone through, EMDR, the type of therapy where it has the lights going back and forth.
Mhm.
That helped a lot, but then, sometimes I'll regress, and I will just and I tell everybody, I'm like, "I have a fear of dogs." I don't go into the whole detail.
Yeah.
Dog looks like my father, and they're like,
Yeah.
I just say I have a fear of dogs, and a lot of people do, but I recognize that a lot of people have fears of all sorts of things. I love birds, and somebody came home to my house and they go, "I'm terrified of birds." I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, okay, well, let me cover the cage," you know? So I think it's just communication.
Yeah. And I love birds. What type of birds do you have?
I love canaries. I've always had a canary, so I love the morning song of canaries where they wake up and they're so happy and they're singing,
Uh-huh.
they're shying, they're just singing, so I love canaries. What about you?
I love hummingbirds. Hummingbirds are my favorite. Yeah.
Birds.
I do. I love hummingbirds. And then real quick, you said MDR with the lights. What exactly is that?
Say, empty yard with the lights?
Yeah, you said that's what type of therapy that you were in was.
Oh, no, EMDR.
Oh, EMDR. And what does that consist of?
It's actually when I first heard it, I thought, "Oh, come on, really?"
Yeah.
It's you could even do it online, which I was really surprised, but it's basically like a light panel,
Yeah.
um, maybe about 4 5 inches long, and it's probably, maybe the width if you extend your arms out, the
Mhm.
light panel goes like that, so it's, like, horizontal, and a light will flicker on the left side, then it'll travel across and then go to the right side, and then it'll repeat, but it has a pattern kind of like a metronome, kind of like a song sort of,
Yeah.
or like a beat, and it'll go back and forth, and the therapist takes you through kind of like a journey. So she would take me, like, with the dogs, she was like, "Okay, you're out now, you're running, you're barefoot, you're in this
Oh,
what do you where do you feel it in your body?" And then I would say, "My hands are sweating, I'm in fear, my heart's pumping." And then she goes, "Okay, you're walking on hot rocks." And then she goes, "What do you feel?" I said, "I have all the stickers in my feet, maybe some glass." And then
okay.
she would walk me through it, and she goes, "What do you see?" And I said, "I see the dogs coming, and that I'm trying to jump over the fence, and I got stuck up on the fence, and, the fence wire got stuck into my skin, and I'm trying to pull over." And so she'll take me through this whole journey, and it'll be in different stages. Um, there's only so much you do, so you go back and back, and then she takes me through the journey, and when I went through this journey, I realized, um, that it was the face of the dog, my dad's face on the dog, and that fear was exactly the same way I felt when my dad was molesting me, and the being powerless, and not being able to scream, like, I couldn't scream, I couldn't say anything, and it was the same thing, so you would just do it alone and in silence. So it's kind of a strange therapy, but it was incredibly effective, and then afterwards, they give you something, you could pick a scent. Not all therapists do this, but they pick a scent, and so since my book is called Under the Orange Blossoms, and orange is a scent because I think senses are beautiful triggers like candles, things like that, where they
Yes.
take you someplace else, they take you to a different experience, and I would smell the orange scent in her hand, and then she would rub it on my hand so that I could stay present, and that to me what triggered, like, a beautiful thing in life, and that's what has still helped me, and so then I would do this therapy over and over again. So that was really effective, but it's still something that triggers me,
I
dogs.
like that. Wow, I've never heard of that. And what was that therapy called again? What was it again?
EMDR.
EMDR. Okay, I'm gonna have to like look into that. That sounds pretty interesting. And as far as anyone who's coping with any type of trauma, what would you suggest as far as a resource or just something that they can do on their own if they don't feel that they have anyone?
Well, I'm of great belief that we have all the intuitively, we have all the knowledge to heal ourselves.
Mhm.
Right now, we have the internet. When I was a kid, I didn't have that, and I lived in a foreign country, and, I that's kind of like where I came up with how I healed myself. I think journaling was one of the things, just writing it down, and when you write something, it might not be your thing. It doesn't have to be grammatical right, or the sentence doesn't even have to make a sense. Just writing like a word, like rage, anger, hate, whatever it is, just put those words on a piece of paper,
Yeah.
and it's kind of, um, it's almost like you're bringing up those words in a different way.
Mhm.
You can't say it, but bringing it out on a piece of paper and watching it, and then just close that book, and later on, you could open up and go, "Oh, wow, yeah, I feel all these things," hate, and I would have pages of this,
Yeah.
pages and pages of this, and then before you know, those little words would become phrases and sayings,
Mhm.
um, and it's a great way to get that out of your body, get what's out of your mind and your body out on paper. I used to rip it up and tear it up in tons of little pieces, and that felt like I had released
Yeah.
those words. I used to do this exercise as a kid is, in felt pen, I would write, words that I would give myself, like, "I'm stupid," "I'm ugly," whatever those words were. I would actually write those words in felt pen, and I would go into the shower and stick it so that it could get splashed, and for me, I would visualize those words fading away, that they didn't own me. They might own me the next day, but at least I had a break from them
Yeah.
owning me that day, and I think with the ritual process of that, they just didn't. have a space in my body, and eventually they kinda went away. I felt exercise and I don't like to work out, but I do not. I'm a short cat, and I felt exercise, though, just stepping out, just walking a little bit, even if it's cold or too hot, it just looking at something, and even if it's 5 minutes, that's a really good way to move your body, and I think, loving your body, loving who you are is it sounds like, "Oh, everybody says that," but it really is. There's a lot of truth to that, who we are, like, loving the vessel that we're in, and when you're hating on yourself, that's probably, like, the last thing you want to love, but it does work. 5 minutes, it doesn't take up I mean, out of the whole day, 5 minutes to do something for yourself, that's pretty loving.
Yeah.
Um, I used to write mantras and stick them on the bathroom mirror or beautiful pieces of poetry or a phrase in a song, whatever that song would just move me, and I'd write that word and I'd stick them on the mirror. And I remember before I knew it, I had so many things on my mirror. Every time I go to the bathroom, brush my teeth, wash my hands, whatever it may be, I would say maybe that mantra, and it would probably be hundreds of times a day.
Yeah.
I'd probably say it 40 times a day, even though I didn't believe it,
Mhm.
but it was interesting that if you do something enough, eventually it starts to soak in and
Yes.
you start to maybe walk it? I guess that's the only way I could say it. It's it's like you walk like walking your talk, I guess you could say that.
Yeah.
Mhm,
Yeah, you become that thing. Yeah.
mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah, what else was, okay, exercise, I was just thinking I was so into those mantras, I think visionary work is a beautiful thing to do, instead of spacing out, I would actually use that time to visualize what I wanted, how I wanted to be, and it didn't take up that much time. It would just be, like, me picturing myself, like, if I wanted to be free, like, what does free of heart look like, free of pain? I would picture what that looked like, and
Mhm.
I would picture myself moving, and I would do that so many times, and before I knew it, that's something that I believed, like, that's what freedom looked like for me.
Okay.
I make a bulletin board, just tear things out of the magazine, and then sometimes just spread it on the bed and look like, "Oh, that's what love looks like," and I put it back on my folder, but I did a lot of visionary work.
Mhm. I
Mm.
like that. That's very different because I never even would have thought to do that. So that's definitely very interesting, and I think that'll impact a lot of lives of others to do that. And tell if you can please tell the listeners one more time the name of your book,
Sure, Under the Orange Blossoms.
Under the Orange Blossoms, because I think that book's definitely going to help a lot of people because I get calls from clients all the time and they struggle with these things, and that's what I wanted to bring you back on here to just tell us more about the healing process, the triggers, and how to overcome a lot of that. And I'm very grateful that you came on again. And I absolutely love having you. And you are absolutely beautiful to be 60. You do not look 60 at all.
Smoke and mirrors.
You're very welcome. And how can the listeners get a hold of you?
Cindy Talks, you could, www at Cindy or www at cindytalks.com.
Okay, at cindytalks.com. Okay. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
Um, yeah, I think, if you've gone through any kind of trauma, and I have to say, no one's exempt of trauma. No one's exempt of pain.
Yeah.
That is part of the human experience. We are here, and through it, we grow. Some people get a little bit more than others.
Mhm.
Some people step through it a little bit quicker, but it is part of the experience of life, of being human, and you're not alone. We all go through this.
Thank you very much, Cindy. Thank you so much.
Great to be here. So good to see you.
Yes, I love seeing you again. But that is all that we have today, listeners. Again, I'm Robin Black, and this is It's All About All About Healing podcast. Everyone, stay blessed.